So we started with one class for elementary age children and their parents. And essentially what it was is, let's talk to kids about who these people are. They need to know that these are not strangers, right? Statistically, more than 90% of the time, the victim knows the abuser. So we need to dispel stranger danger out of the gate.
Hi, I'm Angela Williams.
And I'm Katie Sudano.
And I'm a survivor of child sexual abuse.
And I'm a survivor of child sexual abuse.
Welcome to Voice Up for the Voiceless. I am so excited that you're tuned in today because you're in for a great show. We're going to talk a lot about prevention, and we have an expert with us, Alli Neal with Revved Up Kids.
I'm
Welcome.
so excited to be
Yes,
here.
We're excited
Welcome,
to have
Alli.
you.
So Alli and I go way back. We met at in Penn State in Pennsylvania, right during the height of the Sandusky disclosure and crisis, really. I think that really shook that campus, and they were scrambling, I think, to do whatever they could. So they immediately put together a child sexual abuse conference, and Alli and I met. So Alli, I'm so glad that these many, many years later, I think we figured it was 2004?
2012.
Yeah. And so welcome, Alli, and we just want you to tell us about Revved Up Kids and the work that you're doing. And please, guys, share this because you're going to get a lot of prevention tips. Right, Katie?
Yeah, absolutely. Make sure and comment. We do answer every comment, and if there's any questions that you have for Miss Alli, I will forward those questions to her to make sure that she answers them properly. And if you like our show, you like our podcast, please hit the subscribe button and that little bell. That way you'll know every time we post a video or a short.
And please stay tuned to the end because we have a special gift for you at the end of the show.
Absolutely.
All right, well, let's dive in.
Awesome.
Tell us about Revved Up Kids.
What do you want to know about Revved Up Kids?
Well, first of all, how did you start this work? I mean,
wow.
Prevention is a big issue. Child sexual abuse is a big issue. And for our viewers just turning in, that is the topic of our show. So what kind of got you in or drew you to this work?
God. So there's the short answer.
Okay.
The longer answer is most of the people who are doing work on this issue, i.e. the two of you, are people who have very close personal experience, either themselves or somebody that they know and love who has been sexually abused. That was not my story at all. I was high level, knowledgeable about sexual predators, but more of the white van driving through the neighborhood knowledge.
The stranger danger kind of thing.
Exactly. And I was a stay-at-home mom, 15 years living the life in suburban Atlanta, raising my kids. And then my husband got downsized from his company of 26 years. And those are the moments in my life when I get on my knees and pray for what God wants. What is the plan? What do you need from us next? Because I know there's a plan. And so he lost his job in November of 2008.
Oof, that
And
was a tough
I
year, I think, for everybody.
Man, that was the height of the
Yeah.
unemployment recession. By the way, he was 49 years old at the time.
Oh, yeah.
Only one job since college, like one company since college. Lots of jobs, but one company since college. He was not an ideal candidate to be looking for a job at that point in time, especially. And I got on my knees and started praying, hey, God, I know that there's a plan. There's always something that, you close one door, you open another. So just whenever you want to reveal that plan, I'm listening and I'm here and I'm ready. And 5 months went by of me just, hey, God, I'm here. I'm just waiting. David's looking for a job and nothing's happening. And I'm kind of wondering and getting a little bit more nervous. And I finally got to a place with God, and I'm sure that some of the viewers and maybe y'all can appreciate this, where you're like, I was praying every day for more than 5 months. I was just praying and waiting for the answer of what's going to happen. And I got to a place of significant frustration with God. I'm sure that all of you, many of the people listening, have been there. Where, what is going on? God, where are you?
Yeah.
Where's my answer?
You kind of feel like you're out in a desert somewhere.
Exactly. And so I got angry, and I was like, God, I have been faithfully praying to you for 5.5 months. I need the answer. I need the plan. I cannot go on. I'm not a patient person.
Yeah.
Give me the plan. So then
I'm laughing because I can relate. So.
Yeah. But the plan came in the most amazing transformational experience of my life, where I was literally, it felt like when you read the Old Testament about how God appeared to some of the prophets, and I'm not saying I felt like a prophet, but I'm just saying I felt like one of those people that God needed to use for a purpose. And it was like a conversation over multiple hours of time where I was receiving the plan, and I was objecting to the plan because I knew nothing about child sexual abuse. And I was like, wait a minute, you've got the wrong person. I don't know anything about this. I cannot possibly do this for you.
So it never touched your children so you were just like, what?
Zero.
So you're like a Moses. You're like, God, I can't do this.
Absolutely.
Oh my goodness.
Absolutely.
Wow.
And every question or objection I raised was countered. And this was hours of time during a sleep, and God talks to me in dreams. That's just the way I've always received from God. But I woke up a couple of different times in the middle of it, looked at the clock, saw the clock, fell back asleep, and was right back in it. It was just, I can't, otherworldly. I cannot describe it. And I wouldn't believe it happened, except that it happened to me. So I woke up the next morning having dreamt very vividly, and a lot of times I dream vividly and I forget. That morning, I didn't forget any of it. Every single bit of it was right here. And then I told David, and I said, listen, here's what happened. I feel like this is what God wants from me, and I need to pursue it. And David gave me his blessing to pursue it, but said, I'm still going to keep looking for a job.
Yeah.
It wasn't David's revelation, right? So he kept looking for a job. I started my journey of figuring out how in the world was I going to be teaching children to be safer from sexual abuse. What does that look like? And God had given me the template, but then I had to just figure out everything else. At one point, David said I need a business plan because he just couldn't wrap his mind around any of it. 45 minutes of time, I had an entire business plan out of my head onto paper with financials and programs and who we're going to serve and how we're going to do it. All of it just
That's
like that.
incredible.
Completely from God.
Yeah.
There's no doubt in my mind.
I have a question. How did you come up with the name Revved Up Kids?
So that's why. Because I knew that when I named the business, it had to be something biblical. And I went through millions of iterations, that all the David and Goliath type, I just was looking in the Bible, trying to come up with something inspirational that honored the revelation. And then I was like, Revved Up Kids. So,
and Revved has another meaning
exactly,
too, so which is really
exactly.
cool.
But for me, it's about that biblical foundation of what happened
Revelation.
and why Revved Up Kids came into being. So it took me 16 months to figure it out before I incorporated. We incorporated as a for-profit in August of 2010. And at that point in time, David was still looking for a job. This is almost 2 years later. Does not have a job. Has had multiple times when he got really close. And I kept saying, if this doesn't work out, it's probably because God wants you to be doing this with me. Like if you don't get this job, and he still could never wrap his mind around it. And then when all of the equipment was coming in the door and we had a business license and a website and all the stuff, then he was like, okay, I get it. I'm in. And then he abandoned his job search and joined me full time.
Wow.
And that was 15 years ago. So LLC for the first 3 years, and then the phone was just ringing off the hook with all these organizations that wanted us to serve their children, but they couldn't pay us. We were set up to train private groups who would pay us tuition for the training. But we didn't want to deny kids training. So that's when in 2014 we went through the giant hoops to become a nonprofit. And that was completely transformational for us as well. After that, we just grew like rocket ship in terms of numbers of kids we were training. So,
what does Revved Up Kids class look like?
So we started with one class for elementary age children and their parents. And essentially what it was is, let's talk to kids about who these people are. They need to know that these are not strangers, right? Statistically, more than 90% of the time, the victim knows the abuser. So we need to dispel stranger danger out of the gate. We need to help kids understand that anybody could be unsafe to them. And they need to have decision-making criteria of how to decide if somebody's safe or unsafe. So that was part of it. Part of it was, what can the child actively be doing that will help them be safer if they encounter an abuser, right? And that is understanding that they actually do have permission to say no to unwanted contact, right?
Yeah, that's huge,
yes.
because we're not brought up to say no to adults.
We are brought up to be
we
pleasers,
have to respect,
right?
and
respect
yes, ma'am,
and obey,
no, ma'am.
respect
Yeah.
and obey. So we're kind of trying to teach them respect is a two-way street. And if somebody is not respecting your personal boundaries, if they're making you uncomfortable or scared, you're allowed to say no. And guess what? You're also allowed to run away. So helping them understand that, helping them to understand how valuable their instinct is as a safety tool, right? In that moment, is your body feeling scared and nervous about what this person is saying or doing? And if it is, you need to be doing everything you can to get away. Helping them understand how to use their voice with power in a moment of maybe somebody trying to attack them, right? Or trying to sexually assault them. You have permission to say no. You have permission to say no in a very loud voice. And don't forget that.
That's huge. Gosh, I wish we had something like that growing up, you know, because we didn't feel like we had that voice or even a choice to use our voices.
And also statistically, when abusers are interviewed in jail, they say that the thing that most deters them is resistance from the child. So that child who is compliant, who's going to just do exactly what they're told because that's how they've been raised, respect and obey adult authority, right? So just kind of trying to flip that for the kids and giving them permission to stand up for themselves and say no if they encounter somebody who's making them scared or nervous. Helping them understand that their body is their property, right? Nobody should be allowed to touch you without your permission. And also, you shouldn't be touching other people without their permission. And that's really hard within a family to begin having those kind of conversations with grandma and grandpa who just want to hug their grandchild to death, right?
Yeah.
Maybe that grandchild isn't feeling it today. They need to know it's okay to say no to grandma or grandpa. And grandma and grandpa have to understand that that's about personal boundary setting, right? So it's a lot about that.
That's a tough one because culturally.
Absolutely.
know,
my goodness. It's so hard. And,
it is.
And the conversation, this is what we say to parents. The conversation is, I'm not accusing you of being a sexual predator by telling you that my child's allowed to say no to you. Like, you're not the predator. I need my child to know they can say no to anybody regardless of who it is.
Yeah.
If they are uncomfortable, if in that moment they're not feeling like they want to hug, it's okay to say no, and nobody's allowed to force them to hug them, right?
We had a situation where there was a grandfather that was like a step grandfather. So I'm already on alert with step anybody. Sorry for the step parents, but it's just because of my situation, my own thing. But I didn't have to say anything to my kids. It was very obvious that they were very uncomfortable with this step grandfather.
Okay.
And he would come in and try to grab them and force them, and he would want to kiss them on the lips.
Ugh.
And it got to a point where my girls were like, you know what, we don't even want to go because he doesn't respect our boundaries.
Right,
and my husband had to step in because I freeze. I'm like wanting to say something, but I'm like looking
you're back
around.
to being that little child, right?
Yeah, and I'm like, okay, is this really happening? Am I seeing what I'm seeing? They're, I can read their body language, but also I don't want to I don't want to make anybody mad. We're at a party.
Oh, of course,
Like,
we always
all
have to
this-
be polite.
Yeah, for sure.
That's the
Yeah.
worst habit that adults
Worst
have
habit.
too.
It's the
Is
worst
we don't want to call people out. We don't want to call out our peers or our relatives
Yeah.
for questionable
And
behavior.
I always say it's more important for your child to be safe than you to offend someone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's more important. If they're
Absolutely.
offended, they're offended.
yeah,
The important thing is that your child is empowered
yeah,
Yeah.
to say no.
Yeah.
I was just fortunate that my husband stepped in and he's like, dude, step away. They don't want to
If
hug
my
you.
child says no,
Yeah, like
it
he had
means
no problem.
right?
So I've learned from him,
Yeah.
but it took me a
Yeah.
And
minute
you
to
go
get over.
a step further with your self-defense, right?
So
you teach them some
absolutely.
physical.
So we know
defense.
that self-defense is not going to work in every situation,
Yeah.
right? We absolutely know that. But guess what? It is super empowering for kids to learn these tactics, to understand that they can actually do something to defend themselves that could be effective, and to know they have permission. You have permission to do this. If somebody is grabbing you, if they're trying to hurt you or trying to take you, you have permission to defend yourself.
I
right?
need that.
Yeah. and we also are talking to them about the lies and the manipulations and the scare tactics that predators are using to silence their victims.
The grooming.
So part of it is they hear high levels sometimes. Most of the time they hear, don't go help the guy with the lost dog, right? Or they hear, don't go to the guy that wants you to come in his van and get the candy. But the parents aren't sitting the kids down and really saying, here's what this might sound like. This might sound like the unsafe person telling you that if you go tell somebody, the police are going to come and take them to jail, but you're gonna go to jail too because you were with them and you were part of it. Or telling you, if you tell anybody, I'm going to do the same thing to your brother or your sister, right? All of those manipulations, the head games that the predators play, that the children never hear those words from someone else
Yeah.
to say, this is only a lie. Don't be afraid of a lie.
Yeah.
Telling you that they will hurt or kill your family if you tell anybody,
Well, they
right?
They instill so much fear. I know that kept me silenced.
Yes,
My stepfather.
yes, and you
said
just
he was gonna
live
hurt
with
my
that
mother.
fear.
Or
Yeah,
you're going to lose
exactly.
something.
And then
it
you
may not
become
be a threat per se, but they could
Yeah.
lose something.
And then you're a child and you've been put in the position of being the protector of the other members of your family
Yeah.
because you don't know that you're supposed to tell. And then, oh, by the way, we need to tell the children, sadly, what if you do tell a trusted adult and what if they don't help
believe you.
What do you
Yeah.
do next? Let's talk through that.
telling.
So it's all of that. It's how do I identify and choose my trusted adults? And oh, by the way, the adult doesn't get to tell you they're your trusted adult.
How do-
you pick
sorry.
them, right?
How do parents know where to find you? Like how, because this is
RevvedUpKids.org.
right, but I mean, obviously you've been doing this for many years.
Yes.
But like this needs to be in schools and daycares. Like it needs to be everywhere.
So I'm really proud to say we've trained almost 46,000 children.
Wow.
Small
That
groups.
just takes a huge
Yeah.
hand
I
of
just got the
applause.
chills.
Yeah, we're so proud of that. But think about that in Metro Atlanta.
Yeah.
That is a drop in the bucket.
Yeah.
And you know what we hear most often when people learn about us? I had no idea you existed. That's our challenge. That's the challenge of any small nonprofit, right?
Right.
Exactly.
We don't have a big marketing budget to tell everybody that we exist by advertising on the radio and spending millions of dollars to push social media. We don't have that. We rely on word of mouth. We rely on grassroots, people to connect us to youth serving organizations and schools. And that's how we reach more kids with training.
So viewers,
So-
if you're listening right now, I want you to go to RevvedUpKids.org. I want you to call your school. I want you to call your church.
Your mayors.
I want you to call
Local government.
your local government, and I want you to tell them that there's an organization that can train kids, groups of kids, and go to RevvedUpKids.org and donate too. Alli needs support because
Yeah.
these classes and the staff and overhead and running a nonprofit is expensive. So Revved Up Kids need your support.
Well, it's so vital even for parents.
Yes.
Because if parents knew what to
Right.
watch out for.
Right.
Look, so you talked about a little bit of stranger danger and somebody coming up and saying the lies or the
And
threats.
that's the easy thing for parents to talk about, isn't it?
It is, because they don't want to go to another
Right.
darker place. But
What if it's grandpa?
yeah,
right?
exactly.
Well, and it's 93% of the time is
Yeah.
someone the
Yeah.
child knows,
Yeah.
loves, and
Yeah.
trusts.
So
Yeah.
parents need to embed that into the conversation. It's not about who this person is. What is this person saying? What are they doing? How is it making me feel? That's how I decide if someone's safe or unsafe to me.
Well, we had this little bit of conversation before the show started. Let's talk about people immediately go to trafficking. Oh, you deal with trafficking. That's where the problem is trafficking. Talk to me a little bit about the confusion, I think,
Right,
that our
right.
society has about child sexual abuse
Right.
versus the trafficking issue. And it's not that they're not related,
Yeah.
but there's a lot of confusion. So speak to that.
I honestly, I don't want to take anything away from the amazing work that is being done to stem child sex trafficking.
Absolutely.
Because I can't imagine a worse horror than that. All sexual abuse is horrifying, but that is horror at another level, right? The thing is, the amount of children who are trafficked is minutia compared to the amount of children who are sexually abused. So, and those trafficking victims, the latest data from Polaris says 84% of them indicate that they were sexually abused at a
In the
younger age before they were ever trafficked. So if the number is that high,
So they're vulnerable.
we know that sexual abuse is a precursor, a huge precursor to trafficking later in life.
So tell our
we
viewers.
need to be preventing the sexual
Yeah.
abuse.
So
we
tell-
need
The root
to
of the
make
problem,
that
yeah.
connection.
Alli, just for our viewers who may just be tuning in and have no clue of the epidemic that we're facing, can you just rattle off some statistics?
Okay, so the latest CDC data that I had pulled was 1 in 4 girls, 1 in 13 boys. We know that boys are dramatically underreported, so I think that 1 in 13 is obviously low. In Georgia, the Georgia ACE study, and for those of you who aren't familiar with the ACE study, Adverse Childhood Experiences, the latest Georgia ACE study came out in 2020, and that's where adults are reporting on any adverse child experience that they had, including, was I sexually abused as a child? 14% of Georgians self-reported that they were sexually abused as children. That's higher than the national average. And we also know that less than 10% of sexual abuse is reported, right?
Yeah.
How many conversations have you had with survivors in their 40s, 50s, 60s who've never told anybody, but then they're talking to you, and because you're working deeply in this issue, they feel safe and they can tell you, right?
Or the
So there's
perpetrators
so
passed away or
many
something.
people
Yeah.
walking around carrying that burden alone because we've attached so much shame and stigma to it that they won't tell.
I won't tell. Probably one of the most memorable phone calls I had years ago, and many of you know, I've been doing this work for a very long time. But one of the most memorable, someone had seen me on a TV show, and they called the office, and it was an 85-year-old woman.
Wow.
And she was crying, and she said, "I just need to tell somebody before I die. Can I tell you my story?" And I will never forget that. I will never forget her sharing what had happened to her as a child, and to have a safe person in a safe place to tell that.
Yeah.
And people don't realize that when you carry that secret, when you carry that weight, that burden, your whole life, it impacts you.
Every
It
day.
impacts every single day. Your stress level, your anxiety level, your fear level. So I just want to encourage our viewers, if you are carrying that secret, please tell someone. You can call me. I'll pick up the phone, I promise. But you need to release it. And Angela's Voice, angelasvoice.com, has wonderful resources to help you heal. Because it's the average age of disclosure is 53 years old. And
I didn't know that.
it's like I say, it's like holding a beach ball underwater. The amount of pressure it takes, and
The energy it takes. And it affects your whole life.
Yeah.
And if,
Especially if you're not
yeah. And
healed.
if I can add something, as somebody who does not have personal experience, like that's the anomaly for me, right? am in this because God told me I needed to be in it. I am not in this because I have any personal experience with sexual abuse. Although I will say over the years, we had family members disclose to us that they were sexually abused as children.
That probably never would have otherwise.
Never would have.
Yeah.
Oh, and haven't told anybody else in the family, but have told us. But anyway, so one of the things that I think is that moment that abuser is sexually assaulting a child, they're taking a piece of that child never, ever gets back. Never gets back.
Yeah.
So you can move forward. You can go on to live these amazing, productive lives, have families, have children of your own. But there's still that little piece that's missing. And there's also that little piece that never leaves you of the trauma. There's always going to be the trauma. And then you find workarounds so that you can have a productive life. But the people that are holding it in, that aren't saying a word, that trauma is just eating them from the inside.
And it's amplified.
Every day, yeah.
Everything is amplified.
So every survivor that I have spoken to that has said they've talked about it, it's like a 10-ton weight lifted off their body of not feeling like they have to bear that alone. And like you said, anybody listening to this, if they're holding that, they've got to find somebody. And I think the fear is if I tell anybody, they're going to look at me differently. They're going to think I'm less. They're going to think I was responsible. They're, all of the things that you reel off in your head that are just patently false. I think that they would receive it. They would feel sad. They would feel empathy. They wouldn't feel pity. And I think that bravery from survivors is the one thing that's missing in this equation, and it is the one thing that's really going to be the game changer for all of us that are trying to prevent it.
Well, hopefully
survivors need, yes, that's
Hopefully
why this is amazing.
is
You
so
should
important.
have, you've got, 15,000 subscribers?
Yeah.
You should have 15,000 applications on your website for people who want to sit at this table and own it and speak it, give it a voice so that everybody starts to understand how prevalent this is.
And get rid of the
right?
stigma of it.
The
because
stigma,
There
yes.
shouldn't be a stigma.
And there isn't a stigma. I think the survivors
It's
have
in
it in
our
their head that
head.
there's a stigma,
Well,
right?
There's a stigma.
There's a stigma.
There's a stigma.
Well, the stigma comes from the perpetrators who are narcissists who then go to the family
100%
and try to
that.
make you look like the crazy person.
Right.
And that's what,
Right, okay.
that's
I get
the
that.
biggest fear for a lot of us.
I think I'm talking about the larger population.
Well,
your friends, your colleagues who would
There's a
learn that you were a survivor.
Yeah, no,
Do
it's
they
the-
receive that with support
Oh,
and love?
100%. I
That's
think
what
it's
I
the
mean.
family, the people that are closest
So
to
within
us.
the families, there's a whole bunch of layers of other stuff
Yeah.
that you have to be willing to bear.
You have
And-
to be
and-
willing to be strong enough
Yes.
to understand that sometimes walking away from the family
Yes.
is going to be healthier, and that's really,
Really,
hard.
really difficult.
I've dealt with it. You've dealt with it. It's because it's your family.
Right.
Well, I
right,
want to say I
right.
do believe, and we can use the word stigma, taboo, but there still is such a discomfort with this issue.
Discomfort
I mean,
for sure.
we've been knocking on doors at churches for years.
Discomfort for sure.
They're so uncomfortable
Yeah.
to talk about
Yeah.
this.
Yeah.
But I want you, for our survivors that are listening, please remove the shame. You have no shame to carry. And when she said a piece of you was taken, I feel like my little innocence was taken. Like I didn't get to be that innocent little girl.
And you didn't get the future that God had originally planned for you, right?
Well,
You got
I
the
don't
different
know.
future. God's plan is perfect from the beginning.
Yeah.
Yes.
But maybe it's a
Satan-
little rocky road at the beginning.
Satan, but all things work together for good for those who love the Lord and called according to His purpose.
I
and I
believe
stand
you.
on that.
Yeah.
I believe that.
I stand on that.
Yes, yes,
So
yes.
all things work together for good, and you've got the power within you. I promise you, you do, and God has healing for you.
Yeah.
Every single
Yeah.
day. Well, let's circle back to our prevention conversation because it's so important. What I really want to say is don't get into the pattern of thinking, oh, this isn't going to happen in my house.
Right.
This isn't going to
hear
happen
that
to
all
my
the time.
child, my grandchild,
Right.
my niece, my nephew.
Right.
Please do not be blinded. Do not think that just because you're in a great neighborhood, you're in a great school, you're in a great church, please don't think that that's any type of protection mechanism for your child. And I hope that through the conversation with Alli that you've gotten some good points. But we really have to start asking our children, does anyone make you feel uncomfortable? We've got to be ready to hear the truth. We've got to look in their eyes to see, are they looking at you directly? Are they answering your questions? Or are they uncomfortable or fidgety or trying to distract you?
Or trying not to cry. That's a huge thing, because they get
So we've
scared.
got to be asking. So please, if you're listening, and we're so grateful for the support that we've had at this podcast. This podcast is life or death for your child. It's life or death. So I want you to ask. Go ahead, Alli.
If I can add, whenever I do, we've got a couple of different seminars we do for parents as well, because we need them to be the frontline protectors, right?
List those seminars.
Parents,
what are they?
guardians. So one of them is called Child Safety Tips for Parents, and it is, how are sexual predators at work in your child's world? How do they select victims? How do they groom the family? What does that look like? What sort of protections can you put in place to keep your child safer? So that's one of them. The other one is all about the mayhem in our children's online world, which, as you know, is just
that's
predator central, right? It's just horrifying.
Yeah.
Children taking their lives.
Yeah, but let me go backwards to what you were saying about the lying or the trying to hide, right? I always say to parents, the predator is going to try and silence them by scaring them. And kids aren't so good at keeping that secret, right? So they're going to be telling you without actually saying the words. And that's where you have to turn into the nuanced behavior that you might be seeing. And like you said, they're saying no, but they're looking away, or suddenly they're having nightmares, or they're asking about, when does somebody get arrested? Why do they go to jail? Just all the little nuanced things that are maybe not normal pattern for your child. That's when you need to be sleuthing and digging deeper and
So
really
I have a
be
question
thoughtful.
for you, because something did happen to my son.
Okay.
And this is after I'm working with Angela. I'm learning of all these protection tools and all these things. I'm watching my kids like a hawk, mostly my girls, because I have 4 of them. And my son, I really didn't feel the need to protect him as much as I know. Isn't that crazy? And I'm in this world. So, but we really didn't have sleepovers, and we really didn't do that type of stuff. But I did notice a change in him, and it was drastic. And he did have the night terrors, not nightmares. It was from one day to the next.
Wow.
It happened suddenly, and both my husband and I noticed. We asked and we asked and we asked. We tried to get him into therapy. We knew. So I don't know if this is even I keep asking myself, what could we have done differently to pull that out of him early, so we could have, because he held the secret until he was about 23 and finally disclosed to us.
Wow.
And
so
he was 9. He was 9 and 10.
Abuser did a major number on him.
He did. He abused him for about a year, apparently, and it was in the family.
So sorry. That's heartbreaking.
Yeah, it was very heartbreaking, and worse. The family, they said it was boys being boys. Because they were kind of close in age, but far enough to where it was significant. And he was the youngest of 4 boys, so he's very experienced, according from what I've told, what he was doing to my son.
And that's,
but I just don't know. Like, how do you tell parents? How do we get it out of them without traumatizing them even more?
Right. So 2 things. Number 1, latest data on youth, peer-on-peer sexual assault. 67 to 75% of sexual abuse is happening peer on peer.
Oh, no.
I think that's directly correlated to the amount of online pornography that our kids are being exposed to. So just for parents to know that too, that's so important.
Yeah, because it made me mad. I was about to say a bad word. It made me so mad because the boys being boys thing.
Right.
Well, he was in high school, ninth grade, and he hadn't even had sex education yet in elementary school.
And
so they're kids. But
absolutely. So here's what I would advise parents to do, and this is what we really work hard on. And I actually, there's a blog post that it's up. I don't know if it's been posted on our social media yet, but it's like the age by age talks. What should you be talking about?
Oh, that's perfect.
But
I'll make sure and put it in the description.
We're telling the parents, this is an ongoing conversation. This is as often as you're talking about to your kids about brushing their teeth and saying please and thank you. Personal safety needs to be embedded in all of it. So if for the first 9 years of his life, you had been talking about it constantly, talking about people that might try to do that. They're not allowed to do that to you. You have permission to say no, but if anybody ever tried to do any of that to you, the first thing you need to do is come and tell me so I can protect you, so I can help you. And even if they tell you something that makes you afraid to tell me, that's how they operate. That's
we
a
had
lie,
those discussions though, but maybe we didn't have them enough. I don't know. It's like these perpetrators, even youth on youth, are so manipulative. And they use the thing that most matters to them.
Absolutely. And for me, it's the role play, because the kids, if they don't hear the words, right? If you say, don't go with the man who has the lost dog, right? And then the man doesn't have a lost dog. He's got a lost cat, right?
Yeah.
Oh, well, it was a dog. Kids are literal. Kids are so literal. So it's, for us, it's strangers don't need help from kids, right?
Yeah.
Period. With anything. Any stranger asking you for help, that could be an unsafe person. And if somebody you know is asking you for help and you want to help them, how can you do that safely? Oh, I need to go tell the adult who's taking care of me. I need to ask permission from the adult who's taking care of me,
or
right?
More often too, I think that children are groomed within the family by being shown pornography.
Right.
I
that
think
happens
children are
for
groomed by making them feel older, teaching
Giving
them
them
about
alcohol.
sex,
Yep.
giving them alcohol.
Yep.
So I think too, those conversations, parents, you need to just go ahead and address that head on. You know, no one is supposed to show you any nudity, any explicit content.
But also, you need to create this comfort level for your child to come to you, right? Yeah. Here's why this is not good. These are pictures and videos of people who are being forced to do this. They didn't want to be in that video. They didn't want to make that picture. They're being forced to do that. That's called abuse. Yeah. If somebody shows that to you, I really think that you should come and talk to me about it.
And even when they accidentally come across pornography, which they're being attacked, or children are being attacked from all areas.
Right? We can't forbid. If we forbid any of it, don't you ever look at, what's the kid going to do? They're going to hide it from you. Exactly. It has to be this comfortable conversation, a comfortable conversation about privates and boundaries, a comfortable conversation about people are not allowed to do this to you, right? And it's never with you, right? It's never do this with you. You're not part of this. This is a person committing a crime against you. Yeah. So just that ongoing, and I know all of the books are just laying the foundation for that for families. But again, if your child, just like Katie said, we observed the behavior, we tried to get it out of him. So then you go back in your mind and you second guess. So what could I have done differently? What don't take that burden on.
But could you tell I was getting a little teary-eyed?
Parents are just, you're doing the best you can. You love your kids, you're doing the best you can, and I think therapeutic support is always helpful with the right therapist who is well versed in sexual trauma, and hopefully he's gotten that. Hopefully he's been able to move a little bit forward from that. But yeah, we're working. I know. I can tell you. You just it broke your heart. right?
did.
And
It
it
did
still
because
breaks your heart.
It does.
Because you feel responsible.
I don't
got a
feel
lifetime.
It
responsible.
happened on my watch.
And he's got
right?
a lifetime
didn't.
of healing.
I
ahead
don't
of
feel
him.
responsible. It didn't happen on my watch. However, I mean, he was my kid.
Well, that's what I meant.
Yeah.
Anytime it's your kid, when
But it
my
was
kid
like-
falls down and scrapes their knee, I sort of feel like it's my responsibility that it happened, even though it's not.
I can just talk to the parents because, like, it happens so secretly and
frequently.
And I look at this person who did this to my son. I would never have guessed.
Expected it. Right?
Never in a million years.
Yeah.
And you know, the trauma that it created within the whole family, but mostly to my son. You know, it's just heart-wrenching because, and it wasn't like the touching and all that. We talked about, thank you. We talked about that. It was more the, you know, he was getting what he wanted if he did something for this person.
The bribing.
And it was a big, huge bribe because it was a video games that I wouldn't let him play.
There you go.
Because
That's
it was
the
a
way they
mature,
operate.
it was a mature game, like, you know, so.
Yep. I'll do this for you if you do this for me. It's just, it's so, there's so many layers. There's so many layers to it, and it's so complex, and it's so difficult, and it's hard to navigate as a parent. It's hard to navigate as a kid.
But again, as hurt as I am and all this, that's why I'm so glad that I have this opportunity, because I can't change the past, but if we have had these programs in our schools, had he been listening it to somebody other than the family members, because kids will listen better to a stranger or teacher sometimes than us repeating, "Are you okay? Are you okay? Did they do this? Did they do that?" You know, so these programs are so important.
Especially when we teach the teenage girls. I always say to the moms, I'm like, you know, a lot of the stuff I'm going to say is exactly what you've been saying, except when you say it, they hear wah, wah, wah.
Exactly.
And then when I stand up there as an expert and say it, suddenly it's going to have some weight. I mean, it's just a strange phenomenon, but it is really important.
We're so grateful to have had you today. I'm so
glad to have been
grateful
here.
that you listened to the call of God. And for you that have stayed with us for the entire show, we have a special gift for you. You can go to voiceupforyou.com and download a free copy of Tough Talk to Tender Hearts.
Amazing.
This book is
such a good book.
Yes, it's written through Angela's voice, and it helps you have these conversations. It helps teach you at what age, how you layer the conversations. It helps you to see signs and symptoms and understand what those signs and symptoms are, especially a distinct change in behavior. It helps you know how to take a disclosure that protects that disclosure and using reflective listening. And it helps teach you about child advocacy centers and what they are and what they're for. So go to our website, voiceupforyou.com, and get your free download of Tough Talk to Tender Hearts, and please share it. You can download it as many times as you want. You can tell your family and friends.
Amazing.
So we're grateful to Alli, grateful for her work.
Thank you.
Please go to Revved Up.
And if you want to talk to us about hosting a private group, we are all on it. One thing I didn't say was we charge tuition when groups can afford to pay us, but every time we train a group that pays tuition, our parity is we train another group at no charge. So we do fundraising and grant writing and individual donations, and all of that supports the free training.
It's like the jewelry parties, you know, invite your friends, except you're going to learn prevention.
So we always end our show with a voice of inspiration, and you are an inspiration, period. And we love you. So can you just speak to our viewers and just give them just some closing thoughts on today's show? A moment.
I'm going to go to the inner voice. My inner voice caused me to pray to God for this revelation that was Revved Up Kids. And I think if you're questioning the direction that your life is taking, if you're questioning whether or not to do something, just turn to God in prayer and really listen, and you'll get your answers. And then do what you need to do. So that's what I would say.
Well, thank you, Alli. And please
you're
view
changing
the world.
Course
you're changing the course of
children, our future.
And keeping them safe. And
thank you.
We would love to have you back to continue this conversation again. So,
Absolutely.
Katie, any closing thoughts?
No, just please share this podcast so that everyone can have access to her website. And again, I'm just going to reiterate, this needs to be taught in schools, in churches, in community associations. Parents and children need to know this information. Well, this has to stop. It's
It has to
insane.
stop.
It's
has
not
to
getting
stop.
better, people. We might be talking about it more, but that doesn't mean it's going away. We
But-
need to end it.
Yeah.
And we have the power to end it. And
We do.
Voice Up for the Voiceless is going to continue amplifying this message. So we want to thank Mesmerize Media for making this podcast possible. We want to thank you, our subscribers, and we want you to continue to share this podcast. I'm Angela Williams.
And I'm Katie Sudano.
Thanks for
Thank
tuning
you.
in.